popular Chinese live streamer was closing in on the truth behind the mysterious death of his beloved travel companion in Xinjiang. Then he was shut down. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. So many stories get instantly better when you add a furry friend. Just think about what Aslan did for Narnia, or Chewbacca for Star Wars, or Hagrid for Harry Potter. In the same way, things took a turn for the better for Chinese travel live streamer Jiao when he found a stray kitten outside his tent one early morning. At that point, Jiao had been traveling around central and western China for over a year. And he had become especially famous for doing so, since he was only using a bike to get around, with all the hardship that presented. Even before the CCP cracked down on people riding bikes. Through live streams on Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, he documented his journey, providing a grueling account of his battle with the extreme temperatures and the tough terrain of some of China's roughest regions. It's like a one-man game of Survivor, but without all the voting. Voting isn't much of a thing in China. For the effort, his account attracted more than 4 million followers. But despite the large following, Jiao's journey was often a solitary one, with the live streamer sometimes going days without being in contact with another soul. That changed in October of last year, when he heard meowing outside his tent in the Altai Mountains of northern Xinjiang. He let the stray kitten inside, where she was quick to curl up in his sleeping bag, and the following morning, she was still hanging around his tent. She seemed cold and hungry and slightly injured near her mouth, so when it was time for Jiao to move on, he brought her along. He made some adjustments to his bike so she could ride with him. Isn't that just about the most wholesome thing you've ever seen? It reminds me of the first act of John Wick. I never finished that movie, but I assume the dog and he lived happily ever after. Even after she recovered, the two of them stuck together. Jiao had found himself a travel companion, and he named her Wukong, after the Monkey King in the classic Chinese novel, Journey to the West. Yes, a cat named after a monkey. Can't judge if you have a pet named something like Waffles. The following months, Jiao and Wukong traveled around Xinjiang, which is one of China's roughest regions, for multiple reasons. By the time they got to more populated areas in December, Jiao had equipped Wukong with a cat leash and a GPS collar. They even made the news that month, after Jiao reportedly helped boost a local Xinjiang yogurt brand that featured in many of his videos. And that way, the pair seemed to bring a lot of welcomed positive attention to Xinjiang. Not that Xinjiang didn't already attract attention, of course. But it was also in Xinjiang that their companionship came to a tragic end, an end that remains a mystery thanks to the intervention of powerful forces. It started on April 15th when a devastated Jiao announced in a video that Wukong had passed away. He found her lifeless body on a road 2 kilometers, about 1.25 miles, from their then campsite in eastern Xinjiang. The news of Wukong's death was received with widespread shock and sorrow among Jiao's followers, many of whom had grown fond of his spirited travel companion. Because even in China, the internet loves cats. The day after Jiao made the announcement, a Chinese news outlet cited police saying the cause of death was a car accident. But it quickly became clear that there were major inconsistencies with the car accident explanation, and soon the mood around Wukong's death began to turn from sorrow to suspicion. You see, Jiao recounted that Wukong and he had been together for the majority of the day that she died, and from his many videos it was evident that the cat rarely strayed far from his side. So it wasn't until around 4 p.m. when Jiao went to check out a museum near their camp and asked for directions that the two were apart. It was after he came back that Wukong was suddenly gone. When she didn't show up, Jiao used her GPS collar around 6 p.m. to look up her location and was surprised to see that she was more than 2 kilometers away. That's when he rushed to her location to find her dead. So how did a cat that didn't usually stray and was alive just a few hours before end up dead far from her owner in the middle of nowhere? And how was a news outlet able to cite the police about a car accident well before Jiao himself knew what had happened? After recovering from the initial shock, Jiao started to investigate, and he shared the results on social media as he went. He went back to the museum hoping that security footage from the area could provide some answers, but reportedly, nothing had been recorded around the time of Wukong's disappearance due to a malfunction. Strange. Jiao was subsequently able to acquire the GPS data from Wukong's caller, which showed that she had been near his location at 4:10 p.m., followed by an unusual 20-minute gap in the data until 4:30 p.m., when her location was suddenly recorded far away from the place where Jiao eventually found her body. This was even more strange, not only because of the missing data, but also because it seemed unlikely that Wukong would have run 2 kilometers into the middle of nowhere only to be run over. I'd make a crime board and present the evidence with a laser pointer, but that'd just make any cats watching this video even more upset. Around that time, Jiao decided to take a car 900 kilometers, about 600 miles, to the Xinjiang capital of Urumqi to have Wukong's body scanned and tested. Some might see that as excessive. I see that as Jiao knowing you should never trust what Chinese authorities tell you. The results showed that all her major internal organs and bones were intact, with no signs of trauma, which ruled out both a vehicle collision and a fall from heights. Instead, the tests found traces of undigested food in her stomach, which was weird since Jiao and Wukong had slept in late that day, meaning that he hadn't fed her by the time she disappeared. So that food would have had to come from somewhere else. Several hours after Jiao found her, she also suddenly started bleeding in a way not consistent with trauma or a natural death, but much more consistent with poisoning. At that point, many social media users that had been following Jiao's investigation were convinced that someone had kidnapped Wukong while Jiao had been at the museum, eventually poisoned her, and dumped her body on a remote road. Some people on Douyin also claim to have seen Wukong listed on a bounty list on the dark web, part of a disturbing phenomenon where people pay money to entice others to abuse or kill cats, and where famous and popular cats are highly prized targets. I guess not all of the internet loves cats. Cat abuse in general is also not uncommon in China. Cat abuse chat groups are numerous, with the well-known Chinese food vlogger Xi Zhihui exposed as a member of such a group in 2023. The dark issues being tied to Wukong's death and the many unanswered questions resulted in Chinese animal rights groups getting involved and urging people with information come forward. But just as Jiao's investigation was starting to deliver answers, he suddenly turned the whole thing on its head. In early May, he released a video recorded at the spot where he found Wukong's body, saying that after a thorough investigation and help from local volunteers, they had all arrived at the conclusion that Wukong's death had been caused by her accidentally ingesting a small rodent, with Jiao saying that other types of causes like car accidents, poisoning, and torture have all been completely ruled out. He even put the blame on himself, stating that Wukong's death was essentially caused by his own failure to look after her. He also added that the incident has caused a very negative public opinion for the local area, and he apologized to everyone for that. Yeah, that's what caused a negative opinion of the area. Part of his apology video was picked up by the Chinese state media Beijing Daily and was posted on the outlet's Douyin account. So it all ended happily for those that truly mattered. The case was solved without reflecting poorly on the Chinese authorities in any way. Everyone could drop the case and return to more sanitized topics. I said more sanitized topics. But Chinese social media users weren't buying it. From Douyin to Weibo, users were digging into the apology video and Jiao's words. One user wrote that it clearly sounded like someone higher up told him to say them, way too official/formal. Jiao even seems to hint at that himself, when in the second part of the video, he suddenly turns around and urges people not to trust what they hear from any one media outlet, and that people should do their own independent thinking. Evergreen advice no matter where you live, to be honest. He also ended the video by saying goodbye to his viewers, which is unusual for him. But soon after, the video was among several uploads that were suddenly deleted from Jiao's Douyin account, while the account itself was set to private, which of course made people realize that everything was on the level and he was probably just taking a break from just kidding. It's because his apology video wasn't sincere enough, one Douyin user later wrote. The move only enraged people more, leading to angry comments such as, "Classic, truly classic, absolutely classic. I'm bursting with rage. They're deleting the Douyin videos. And Wukong probably ate a bat, and after eating it, it could fly and flew straight for 2 kilometers. I know they're being sarcastic, but it does make me wonder, if you bite a vampire, would that make you into a vampire or turn them into a human? Now, do the signs of a forced apology video and a crackdown on Jiao's account mean that the local authorities in Xinjiang were somehow involved in Wukong's death and were trying to cover it up? Who knows? But the viral story of a popular live streamer searching for answers about the passing of his beloved travel companion was probably causing too much of a headache for the local authorities in eastern Xinjiang. When I'm finding something else going on in the area, am I going to show the photo a third time? Yeah, I am. The possibly very dark circumstances of Wukong's death weren't exactly reflecting well on the area, and neither was the fact that the story had become the center of a wider discussion about animal cruelty and animal abuse in China. Again, not that Xinjiang has an image problem in any way. Everything else I've heard about the region has been great. So it's likely that authorities stepped in to shut Jiao down to put an end to the matter, especially in case more evidence might turn up that could have made the whole thing even more appalling, which would be difficult, but possible. It also wouldn't be the first time that local Chinese officials have stepped in forcefully to protect the image of their jurisdiction. All over China, Chinese local authorities are often obsessed with presenting their localities as lovely and impeccable places. That's partly as an attempt to attract more tourists, a big focus for generating revenue now that many other Chinese sectors are struggling, and apparently ethnic cleansing isn't exactly a top 10 idea for vacations. But it's also a central element in the Communist Party's policy of telling China's story well. This mission is essentially about using all channels available to present China in a positive light, both to a foreign audience and a domestic one. In fact, local authorities are sometimes willing to go to extreme lengths to keep the positive vibes flowing. They will cover up crimes, like last year when local officials in the northern Chinese province of Hebei helped cover up viral stories of secret cameras being installed in hotel rooms by hotel managers that later sold the footage online. And they will even commit crimes, like earlier this year when local officials in the central province of Shanxi broke into a shop to turn on the lights so the shop could help light up a historical area during the night for passing tourists. But God forbid those tourists decide to go for a nighttime bike ride for some dumplings. Local officials are also eager to embrace you if your activities help spread positive energy about their area and maybe even help sell some local products, until you start making a fuss. Then you might suddenly find yourself making a public, overly formal apology for all to see before you're shut down and no one will find it suspicious at all. It probably didn't help Jiao's case either that the Chinese authorities aren't big on animal rights. China does not have proper national legislation that explicitly outlaws animal cruelty and abuse, which isn't a surprise considering how comfortable they seem with human cruelty and abuse. And it's not just a matter of passive negligence. During the draconian Chinese COVID lockdowns, Chinese health workers reportedly actively killed pets while their owners were in quarantine for reasons. If you ask me what those reasons are, best I can come up with is just for the love of the game. So in the end, it does seem like Jiao was eventually threatened by forces that made it difficult for him and any other member of the public to get to the bottom of what truly happened to Wukong. But despite how unresolved and unfair it turned out, Jiao did manage to bring Wukong with him on one last trip. He took her back to the Altai Mountains in northern Xinjiang where he first met her. And there, he laid her to rest. So what do you think happened to Wukong? Let me know in the comments below. I do love reading them, even if I can't respond to everyone. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.